In an industry stuffed with marketing bullshit, empty promises, and shiny-suited liars, one woman's had enough. She knows what it's like to have the wrong clients, no money, and no time for fun. But she also knows how to fix it. And on the Business for Superheroes show, she promises to tell the down and dirty truth about business, sales, and running away with the circus. Here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
And welcome to the Business for Superheroes show. I'm Vicky Fraser and this is my husband Joe.
Hello.
Hello. What?
Nothing.
Today's show is brought to you by Random Booze.
Random Booze.
And EU woes.
Oh, EU. Yeah, we had lots of friends around at the weekend, which was lovely, and we had people camping in the back garden and the dingle, and we had a fire, and we got a little bit tipsy, and now our house is full of random booze.
Which is kind of awesome, but also a little bit frightening. At the moment, we're drinking... What are we drinking? Cider.
Some kind of Magna's pink cider thing.
It's not pink, it's kind of orangey.
Which is all right. It's not too bad. But shortly we'll have to move on to the something else cider. Pear cider. There's a Perry cider.
Perry. Oh, there was a whole discussion about whether Perry is... No, whether pear cider is the same as Perry, or if it's posh Perry, or if Perry's posh pear cider.
Or if pear cider is indeed a mix of Perry and cider.
Yes. We'll have to investigate that.
We need to draw a Venn diagram.
Yeah, anyway. But yes, and it was a really cool weekend.
Very nice.
Took our minds off the whole sad EU thing. Very sad and angry about that.
That was a bad Friday morning, wasn't it?
It was a bad Friday morning. I thought it was... I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and it's going to be all like, oh, I was just kidding. And I thought my Facebook newsfeed was joking. And it's just deeply shit, really.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, but we're gonna come back to that in a bit because there are some business lessons to be learned from this. Besides the fact that we're now all fucked.
I don't think we're fucked.
No,
I think we're just.
I was being facetious.
We're a slightly more disappointing country than I thought we were.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not even people had legitimate reasons for voting leave. Yeah. Some people had legitimate reasons for voting leave.
Some people thought about it and came up with sensible decisions, and that's one thing.
That's absolutely fine. And I'm genuinely interested in hearing the reasons behind that. But what has come out of the woodwork since that? I'm seeing horrific examples of public racism and xenophobia and people being shouted at in the street to go home, and I don't recognise the country that we live in right now.
That's not who we are.
No, it's not, and it makes me... I'm angry about that. It's not in my name. Not in my name. None of this shit is in my name. I'm really upset about it. Because it's not just about politics and economics. The EU is about being part of something bigger than just our little patch of earth.
Yeah, I mean, if we're thinking about the long game here, we're never going to get to the Star Trek Federation of Planets if we can't figure out how to work together.
No, we're not. And the EU is far from perfect. I'm not for a second saying
it's far from the Federation of Planets.
It's also far from the Federation of Planets. But we're not going to get closer to the Federation of Planets by cutting off our slightly stinky toe.
Turning our backs on, sorting out bigger issues.
Yeah. Think of all the friendships that are going to be lost, that are never going to happen. All of the romances. What's going to happen to my friends that live out there?
I actually apologised to the guys who work for me.
Well, you didn't vote to leave.
No, I didn't. But, I kind of feel like, I'm as much this country as anyone else.
So I think now, actually, you know what? The message that I want, whatever you voted, if you're still listening and you voted leave, whatever you voted, I think it's really, really, really important to actively stand against any kind of racism or xenophobia that's popping up, because this is not somebody else's problem. This is everybody's problem. Yeah. And this is not the country that I want. I don't want to live in a country where it's okay for people to wave banners that say repatriation, and that makes me feel physically sick.
Yeah.
And it's up to all of us to say, okay, we've got to move forwards now with whatever happens. We've got to do the best we can, and that best absolutely doesn't include treating other human beings like that.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, so I would like you to stand up and against racism and xenophobia wherever you see it, because bollocks to those people that are using it as an excuse to legitimise their hatred. It sucks. Anyway, that's enough politics. I'll come back to the lessons we can learn from it because there are some good ones. But anyway, so last week we left you hanging on tenterhooks, and that got me thinking about what tenterhooks actually are, which hasn't really got anything to do with anything, except for the fact that it's a phrase I use a lot, and it's not tenterhooks, by the way. That's one of my pet hates is when people write tenterhooks with a D. It's tenterhooks. Joe's nodding at me.
I am nodding. I'm like, definitely tenterhooks. So what are tenterhooks?
Well, I had a look, and Wikipedia says, there's an album, a music album called Tenterhooks. Anyway, tenterhooks are hooks in a device called a tenter.
Oh, well, that would make sense.
And tenters were originally large wooden frames which were used as far back as the 14th century in the process of making woolen cloth.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
I know. After a piece of cloth was woven, it still contained oil from the fleece and some dirt, and so a craftsman called a fuller, also called a tucker or a walker,
used Fuller's Earth. Fuller's Earth.
Fuller's Earth.
I knew what Fuller's Earth is. Because they talk about it in Swiss Family Robinson.
That was... Anyway, when they dried out the cloth and they cleaned it and dried it out, they had to prevent it from shrinking, and so they put the wet cloth on a tenter and left it dry outdoors. And yeah, tenterhooks. Tenter is from Latin tendere. Tenterhooks are hooked nails driven through the wood, and they kind of stretched it and dried it so it wouldn't go misshapen.
Okay.
So you go. So yeah,
that's something new.
We've left you waiting on tenterhooks, but not literally because that would be uncomfortable.
Well, now you know. Great. Lovely.
Yeah. So anyway, we were talking about AIDA last week, or AIDCA, anti-AIDA.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's attention, interest, desire, conviction, and action. And last week we talked about attention, and we said, we have to get people's attention because otherwise you might as well just be whistling into the wind. Nobody's going to hear you.
Mm-hmm. Big headlines, good stuff.
Yeah. Pains.
Make people look at you.
Yeah. Remember, you've got to find your customer's dog poo.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So that was that. And then once you've done that, you've got to keep their interest by following on from whatever you did to get their attention. And it must follow on. It can't just be like dog poo. And then, you know what? There's a tree over here. That was a bit random, but you get the idea.
Yes. It has to be dog poo. Here's a pooper scooper.
Yes, something like that. Yes. Or
okay.
overshoes.
Or overshoes. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go into the right. So, if you want to know what not to do, have a look at the yellow pages, if such a thing still exists.
I think it does.
Yeah.
We use one to light our fire quite often.
There's page after page of crappy, boring adverts in the yellow pages, and they all look the same, and they all start with A1 electrical services, and that's at the beginning of each thing. And
AAA taxis.
AAA taxis, because they work on the not unreasonable premise that people will, go for the first thing they see. And that's when they've got nothing else to go by, they will go for the first thing that they see. And the reason that all of the ads in the yellow pages are all shit and look the same and don't work is because every business that advertises in the yellow pages has a look at what all of their competitors does, and then they do something exactly the same because they don't want to be different, which is the epitome of stupid. And it's a massive waste of money because the yellow page is not cheap to advertise in.
Is it not?
No, it's expensive.
It's got to be getting cheaper now, though, surely.
I don't know. But the advertising reps are useless as well because their goal is to sell the advertising space, not to help you, make a shitload of money. So they're all like, oh, look at what everybody else has done. And they're just shit.
We can set that up for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let advertising people set your ad up for you, for goodness sake. I'm sure there are some that know what they're doing. Anyway, so yeah, attention, interest, and desire. And, you need to stoke their desire, not for the thing itself, because they need to already want it, but for your thing.
Okay. What's special about my thing?
Well, I don't know. You have to tell me.
Okay.
You have to show me with your clever advertising. Well, you're not clever advertising, you're effective advertising.
Okay.
So anyway, that was all that. So you've done all that, and in the old days, that would be enough. You could just say, are you bald? Rub my cure for baldness pellets on your bald, shiny pate, and tomorrow you will wake up with a sprouty head of hair. And of course you wouldn't, it's all nonsense. But that was A, legal in those days, and B, people would, send off for these shiny baldness pellets and rub them into their shiny bald noggins and then be terribly disappointed when their head in the sprout. And so, there's some really hilarious old adverts out there as well. One of my favourite things is looking at old. I collect old issues of Punch magazine, and the adverts in there are just brilliant. Some of them are genuinely very good, and they understand, what makes people tick and their motivations for buying stuff. But some of them are just, some of them are just awful. And it's like stuff that you'd never get away with today because it's blatant lies, and you can't get away with that sort of thing legally and just generally because people are a bit savvier than that today. I think. I don't know, unless would you fall for something that promised to cure your baldness if you were desperate enough, I suppose.
I'd like to point out to our gentle listener at this point that I have a magnificent head of hair.
Whereas I was bald as a snooker cue. Bull. Well, snooker cues aren't hairy either, I suppose.
It's true.
Anyway, so yeah.
Which reminds me, it gets more dome wax for you. So yeah, basically you have to convince people. If you want me to buy your stuff, you need to convince me. Do not expect me to take your word for it because I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to believe you. People are very sceptical these days. Very sceptical.
And rightly so, because there's an awful lot of nonsense out there, even today.
Okay, so what comes next?
So you've got to convince people. What can you do to convince people? What would you do to convince somebody that you were... What do you do to convince your clients that you're worth a punt?
Worth a punt? Generally, we demonstrate a solution to their problem. We write them a report and we do some testing in a lab and we go, look, you came to us with this problem. Here is a demonstration of us fixing it.
Cool.
That's how we convince them that it's going to work.
Cool. That's a good thing for Joe's company to do, by the way, because they can't just take that information and replicate it elsewhere. That's something that you need to be careful about. Because, most people are fairly honest, but if you give somebody too much information, then...
Yeah, we don't tell them how to do it. We just tell them, here it is being done.
Yeah, you give them the what and the why, make them pay for the how.
Yeah.
Is basically the thing. So yeah, you can demonstrate, as Joe's company does. You can show numbers. I can talk about results that I've had with my clients. So I did a direct mail campaign for a client of mine a year ago, and it was really cool. And this wasn't just down to me because it was a whole integrated campaign with their sales team making phone calls and follow-ups. But I put together a bunch of sales letters, lumpy mail, and postcards and stuff, and within like 2 months of that campaign going live, I think she'd already generated £500,000 worth of income, and
sweet,
which was several billion times more than the retainer that she was paying me. So the return on investment for that was pretty astronomical.
Yeah, put your prices up.
Yeah, just last well, I have since then. Just last week, I did a little email campaign for my biggest client now. And after a nervy evening where he didn't get any sales at all, which happens all the time, by the way, more of the stuff that you do won't work than will work. But the next day, he had like 5 or 6 sales, which brought him in, I'm just trying to work out now, like maybe 25 times what he'd invested in me to write the things.
Bargain.
Absolute bargain when you consider it that way. So that's the way that I will show my proof. You can also show images of the product in use if it's a kind of physical thing.
Your shiny waxy head.
My shiny waxy head, yeah, before and after shots. So my shiny waxy head followed by my sprouted head of hair.
Yeah.
I'm not bald, by the way. And then there's social proof as well. So if it's not something that you can really show numbers for very easily, or you don't have the numbers, get testimonials from happy clients, because a lot of what you do is making people's lives easier and making them happy. It's not just the results. So, my biggest client at the moment doesn't just work with me because I'm good at what I do and because I get results.
Or because it's profitable.
Or because it's profitable, but also because he doesn't have to do all this stuff. I do it all for him.
Yeah.
So...
taking away his problems and all that.
Yeah, just enabling him to faff around on his farm, basically. I'm just kidding, John. And then, expert or celebrity endorsements work as well for that kind of thing. That's another form of proof.
Oof. That's a shame, isn't it? Celebrity endorsements.
Well, if it's a relevant celebrity, it's fine. If you've got Tiger Woods endorsing golf clubs, then that's fine.
Yeah.
I suppose he's both a celebrity and an expert.
I think if he uses those golf clubs, that's great. If he just says they're great golf clubs, then I think that's...
I would hope that most people wouldn't endorse something that they've never used. But yeah, I mean, people kind of like, I don't know, maybe Peter Andre endorsing microphones. Oh no, he's a singer. Peter, I can't think of anything.
Shoes.
Well, he wears shoes though.
Oh yeah, but what's that got to do with it?
Peter Andre endorsing gardening equipment would be a bit random.
Yes.
Yeah. Iggy Pop doing bloody car insurance adverts was completely random.
What was that about?
Yeah, anyway.
He'd lowered himself. That was... Oh.
Yeah. So basically, you have to do something to convince your customers to buy from you.
Conviction.
That's the C in Auntie AIDCA. And this is also a really good opportunity to overcome people's objections as well, because everybody has objections when they're coming to buy a product, even if they don't speak them out loud, they're in their heads. And
it's, you need to, when you're writing your avatars and you're thinking about what your advert's got to achieve, you've got to overcome those.
Yeah.
So you got to know what you got to, you're thinking, well, the customer's going to think it's expensive, or that it might not work, or that it, there's a cheaper one somewhere else, so you've got to push your way past those.
Yeah.
You've got to satisfy them that your thing is the right thing.
Yep. Particularly in my industry, which is rife with tossers, it is. There's a load of really good people, but there's an awful lot of, slimy internet marketers around. But yeah, I mean, people will be really wary about having been ripped off before, or even if not actually actively ripped off, about having put a lot of money into something that hasn't worked for them before, which unfortunately is the nature of marketing. And so, also don't ever believe anybody who can guarantee results. I never guarantee results with my marketing and copywriting, because you can't. And so I would, that should be a red flag for people.
Yeah, anyone who says, we'll do this once and you will make £1 million is lying.
Yeah, if they get really, really lucky, then, woohoo, but you can't guarantee that kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, you've got to overcome people's objections, whatever those objections might be, and don't think that you can sidestep them, because your prospects will be thinking about it, and if you don't bring them up, then they will bring them up, not with you and not out loud, but they will bring them up in their heads, and if you haven't addressed them, they'll go elsewhere. Somebody that has, because they are things that worry them. So you need to be honest about what people worry about and reassure them, and you can do that quite easily. You can do that by saying, I know a lot of people when they first come across this kind of thing might worry about X, Y, and Z. Well, you don't need to worry because blah, blah, blah.
Here's my demonstrating. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
And it also, doing that also shows expertise, doesn't it? Because you're saying, I understand where you are coming from.
Yes, exactly. And that's a really good point, Joe. You always have to start with where your prospect is right now, not where you want them to be in the future, because at the moment they can't see whatever shiny future you're going to build for them. All they can see is the pain and the worry that they're feeling. So you have to start from that position and then walk them through the process. Yeah,
you're a mechanic. You're worried about, you're trying to sell them a maintenance program or a service program for the car or whatever. The worry is, well, what if I change my car? What if I sign up for this thing and I need to change my car? So you need to address, this thing travels with you, not with your car.
That's a really good one, actually.
Yeah, you need to, whatever it is that you think they might worry about, you need to sort it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you need to ask for action. And that's really important. It seems fairly obvious, but the number of people who don't ask for action or don't do it strongly is staggering. It's like, I think as a nation, we're really reluctant to ask people to spend money. It's quite a British thing. So yeah, ask for action and really spell it out as well. Assume that the people that you're talking to don't assume that they're thick, but assume that they're not paying attention, because they're not. And assume that you need to make it very, very simple. So, don't just assume they're going to read your stuff and go woohoo and then buy it. You have to tell them to buy. And it has to be really, really, really clear. So tell them exactly what to do. So if it's click a button, tell them what button to click. Tell them where it is.
This blue button here.
Tell them what to do next. If a form's going to pop up, tell them what to do next. Tell them to put their name and their best email address in, and then hit the other button. Tell them exactly what's going to happen next. Actually, no, tell them when to do it as well. So tell them to do it right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't think about it and come back tomorrow. Do it now.
Tell them what happens next. So after they've clicked that button, what will happen next? If they get an email, tell them what's going to be in the email. Tell them when it'll arrive. Tell them what to do next. It's, step by step by step, idiot-proof instructions. Make it really easy for people. And also reiterate what will happen if they don't buy, which basically is that their pain will continue, their problems will continue, their lives will explode, and
car still won't get maintained,
and the aliens will take over the world. So yeah. You have to reiterate all of those things and be really clear about it. And you're not going to have room to do all of this in a Yellow Pages advert, but you can push people towards a place where you can do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's it, really. Simple. That's how AIDA works. And, professional copywriters know all this stuff, or they, should do. But business owners don't, because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that this couple of podcast episodes has helped a little bit to show you that you don't need any daft ninja tricks.
Yeah, don't trick people, don't lie to people, don't try and sell them something they don't need.
Just show people what's in it for them and how it will help them to solve their problems, how you can help them to solve their problems, and why you. That's really, really important. So, did we give them homework last week and tell them to think about why they buy certain products?
I don't know. I've had a really heavy weekend since then.
Well, it's worth reiterating, I think. So when you go shopping, dear listener, when you're picking stuff up off the shelves, have a little bit of a think about why you're choosing that particular thing and not something else. So when you're choosing toothpaste, why Colgate and not, Sensodyne? For me, it's because that was my childhood toothpaste, and it's tied up with emotional memories and all sorts.
Yeah. Why this tin of chopped tomatoes instead of that tin of chopped tomatoes?
Yes.
I'm not quite sure why, but I've got a definite idea of which tin of chopped tomatoes I'm going to pick up.
Yeah, I like the Napolina ones.
Exactly. I don't know why, but they get picked up, don't they?
I think because they sound kind of Italian, and we're usually making Italian-y things with them. And so, they probably don't taste any different from the supermarket ones, but I like them. So yeah, think about why you buy some and not others, and that will help you to come up with why people choose you and not somebody else. And ask people as well.
That's a good idea.
So, yeah, ask people why they choose you. You might get some nonsense answers, but if you can strike up a conversation and ask them in person or over the phone as well, because if you make people think about it in an email, you'll get considered kind of constructed answers, whereas if you have a chat and you draw it out of people in the chat, you'll get stuff that you would never in a million years get written down in an email. So try that. I think that's it, really. I was going to talk a little bit about... No, let's spend a couple of minutes on a little bonus.
Okay.
Lessons from the awful referendum that's just happened.
Right.
And why I think that the Remain campaign... Actually, why it was just awful, and why it was so difficult to get people to change their minds. Because you're basically never going to persuade anybody to do anything by standing on the other side of a fence and shouting at them. And that's, to me, seems like an awful lot of what both of the campaigns have been about.
Mm-hmm.
The Leave and Remain. There's been awfulness on both sides.
Yes.
And lies on both sides.
Yes. And
it's been very frustrating. But one thing that I haven't liked has just been, there's been a lot of name calling. And you're never, ever, ever going to change somebody's mind by insulting them, by talking down to them, or by shouting at them.
The other side's an idiot.
Yeah. And that, calling people names and shouting at them and, just being aggressive about it just makes them dig their heels in further. They're going to actively not change their minds.
Yeah, they're not going to come around to your way of thinking because they don't like you anymore.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head there, because if people need to like you if they're going to buy from you. If they don't like you, they're never going to buy from you, ever. And so you have to get people to like you, and you have to be respectful of people, which you should be anyway. And just shouting at people from the opposite side of a room it just won't persuade. It's not persuasive. It's just unpleasant.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a big problem from this referendum. But the Remain campaign, I think, failed partly because it dismissed people's very legitimate concerns. A lot of Leavers had very legitimate concerns about where the country's going and what's wrong with the EU and all the rest of it.
Remain just called them racist idiots.
Well, no, I don't think that's true. I think that happened a lot on Facebook, but I think actually the campaign itself hasn't. I think they've tried to point out that immigration is a very tiny issue and actually has very little to do with the EU, and that they were lies from the Leave campaign. But what I think it failed to do is take into account people's feelings, and instead they just threw lots of facts at people. And there's a massive problem with that, because facts and logic will not get the persuasive job done when emotions are running high. You have to tap into what people are feeling to persuade them to change their minds. And the people, I'm really passionate about the EU, and I was really passionate about staying in the EU. But kind of the stuff that I've seen from people on the other side, they were at least as passionate about the stuff that they cared about.
Yeah.
And they just throwing arguments of facts and logic at somebody who is emotionally invested in something is not going to work. You can't argue somebody out of an emotional position with logic. It's never going to happen. So, if the Remain side had tapped into the emotions that people were feeling, understood them, really made an effort to understand them, and then put their arguments that way, I think perhaps we could have got a lot further than we did. I think it's a wasted opportunity. I think it was a shame. And now all the shit is hitting the fan.
Now it's going to take years to unravel.
It is. And the saddest thing of all is that it's massively polarised the country. And which is a good thing in marketing, because you want to polarise your audience, and this kind of thing can... this is a brilliant example of how polarisation in marketing can work on a kind of grand national scale, because now you've got two camps of people who are diametrically opposed, and it's going to take a long time, I think, and a lot of effort to kind of come back and meet in the middle.
Yes. Yeah, it will.
And I think that both sides have got a lot to answer for that. I think they've done quite a lot of damage to our society.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because it's I think with an election, there's not it's not a binary choice.
No.
There's middle ground. There's voting. There's not voting, and there's 3 parties, maybe 4 or 5.
And you're not stuck with it forever.
This is just binary.
Yeah.
Really divisive.
It's a real shame. But there are those are that I wanted to mention it a little bit, because I don't want it to turn into a political podcast or anything. But there are legitimate lessons to be learned about persuasion and about about polarization and all the rest of it. So try and look beyond the nastiness and have a look at what's happened and what's happened with the country and what's happened with the vote, and understand why it's happened. Because if you can get your head around that, your marketing will improve. And I'm not for a second saying that you need, I don't want any nastiness. You don't need to be nasty about it. You just need to understand why it's happened and why it's now going to be difficult. So there you go. Right. But on a lighter note, I want to talk a bit about Boston Legal next week.
Okay.
Because it's awesome. People listening are probably rolling their eyes and they're like, wasn't this show around 53 years ago? And yes, it was. But it's
very good.
It is very good, and I start these things late. So
we generally start these things when they're finished, and then we can just binge watch all the way through, like multiple episodes. Yeah.
So yeah, but there's a particular episode of Boston Legal that I want to talk about next week, in which James Spader is particularly amazing because he's awesome in it, isn't he?
He is great.
William Shatner is hilarious in it. But we'll talk about that next week, and also next week we might talk about how to charge higher prices without losing all of your customers. Depends how long James Spader takes.
Okay.
Anyway, so there you go. Thanks for listening, podcast fans. Thanks for being here, Joe.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've run out of cider, though. I'm going to have to go and raid the weird boobs cupboard.
That sounded like weird boobs cupboard.
Weird boobs cupboard. That's what we've got.
Weird boobs cupboard. So yeah, if you haven't bought my book, go to businessforsuperheroes.com and grab yourself a copy. I've just put my Kindle version of my book on free promotion.
Oh, blimey.
So if you're not wanting to spend £7...
Come on, give us £7
on a Kindle book, you can... No, I don't mind at all. If you want a copy of my book, the only thing that I will say is if you're going to go and get a free copy from my Kindle promotion, which will be starting tomorrow, read the damn thing.
Yeah, that's the trouble, isn't it? People get stuff for free, they don't value it so much.
Yeah, read it, and then leave me a review if you would. I would be very grateful. Even if it's a shit review, I'd like to hear that too. I might tear it to bits, but that's fine. In a fit of bitterness. But yeah, grab a copy of my Kindle. It'll still it's going on free promotion tomorrow, but it's not. That's tomorrow because we're recording it now.
It'll be a couple of days ago. It'll be now.
It'll be free over the weekend, basically the weekend that you're listening to it. So go onto Amazon, look for Business for Superheroes, grab yourself a free copy on Kindle, and then send me an email with the receipt and your mailing address, and I will add you to the Business for Superheroes Club, which is absolutely free.
Awesome.
Yeah. Have a splendid week, chaps. Try not to punch too many people that voted the other way from you. Let's be nice to each other, and happy weekend.
Yeah, nice one.
Bye.
Bye.
Like what you've just heard? Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, send them to www.businessforsuperheroes.com/podcast.